I'm John Kaiser at the Metals Investor Forum in Toronto, February 28th, 2025. I am here with Richard Drechsler, CEO of Trifecta Gold Corp. Richard, welcome to Toronto.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
Last year, Strategic Metals, which was a parent company of Trifecta Gold Corp, decided to repurpose the company by optioning all of its Yukon intrusion-related gold system type projects to the company and make it a deposit type specialized vehicle. This came in the wake of the 2022 discovery that Snowline Gold made in southeastern Yukon on the Rogue project, which has resulted in the Valley deposit, which at last count has over 7 million ounces already and growing, and at a grade that's sort of 1 to 2 gram per ton for the estimate, very different from what we have seen for the Yukon. In what way is the Valley discovery of Snowline a game changer for the potential of the Tombstone Gold Belt within at least the Yukon portion of it?
Yeah, so in the Yukon portion, these intrusions have been known for some time, and there's been a number of exploration campaigns over the years to try to find them, but typically the grade has been in the order of 0.7 grams, right? I mean, you see deposits in the Alaskan offset of this belt that are around that grade. The Eagle Mine was around that grade, and so to find a deposit like that, a long way from infrastructure, wasn't really attractive to anybody. But like you said, the grade at Snowline was really the game changer there. They're 500-meter holes that are well over 2 grams. That was the game changer. And once we realized that belt of intrusive rocks could host that, that basically renewed the whole exploration interest in that belt. And Strategic Metals, being a project generator, had staked a bunch of these targets early on, like a number of years ago, and started to do some of the early stage work to really refine them, do the big geochem surveys, some geophysical surveys and whatnot, to start to advance those to define some intrusion related targets on those projects. And yeah, I mean, it was basically after Snowline made that discovery, there was a renewed interest in the belt, obviously. And when gold prices started to run in late 2023, I went to Doug, who was the CEO of Strategic, and said, look, our Strategic had a number of those projects under option to other parties, but for one reason or another, they'd come back sort of through lockdowns, and then they were back into Strategic, and gold's running. And so I went to Doug and I said, we've got to move these things forward. We've got this great vehicle in-house here. Let's find a way to put the two together and get after this ourselves. Because really the flagship there was drill tested by Strategic in 2020, and then it was out the door to a partner, which is their typical model.
Now, reduced intrusion related gold system with its terrible abbreviation, RITGS, whatever, it's a real mouthful. People don't really know what that means. What are good examples of this type of deposit in sort of the Yukon, Alaska area?
Yes, well, so you've got Fairbanks and Pogo is related to the intrusion-related system as well, but it's more high-grade veins. That's in Alaska. And then on the Yukon side, you've got Sitka Gold is defining more and more resources at their system at the RC. As you move closer to our Mount Hinton project, you've got the Victoria Gold's Eagle and the Raven deposits, multi-million ounce deposits. One of our other neighbors is Banyan Gold. They've got 7 million ounces, which is developed above an intrusion. So again, very fertile intrusions, obviously, in the belt. And then as we move further out towards Snowline, another 7 million ounces. So really, this belt in the Yukon portion, people looking at these intrusions have defined north of 17 million ounces since 2020. So I think that's got to make it one of the hottest exploration belts in the world for gold. And really, that was what got us in there. And the difference between the reduced intrusion deposits, some of the other intrusions that are in southwest Yukon, is a lot of those would have magnetite in them, so they would come up as a mag high in geophysical surveys. Whereas typically these reduced intrusions, they'll show up as mag lows with like a hornfels sort of aerial around a magnetic low feature. And that's sort of from a geophysical targeting perspective, that's what we look at for geophysical features to set them apart.
Now, when you inherited Mount Hinton last year, it came with several veins that have a dominant gold grade that does have silver. It's to the southeast of the Keno Hill district, where over 200 million ounces, high-grade silver ounces, have been mined from lenses within vein structures on that system. Last year, you did some work on these veins. What are they related to? Are they related to the Keno Hill district, or are they related to something else? And based on sort of the strike and the depth potential and whatever your understanding about the geology, what's the potential grade range and tonnage range that you see as an exploration target there? And if money were falling from the sky, which it hasn't for quite a long time, how much money would it take to make or break that potential for just that vein portion of Mount Hinton?
Okay, yeah. So like you said, a number of the veins on Mount Hinton have been known for some time. So the veins on the northern part of our project, a lot of them were actually discovered by United Keno Hill Mines, which was a previous owner of some of the Mount Hinton ground. And so in the 80s, they found a number of them, because we are in the direct extension of the same stratigraphy that hosts all that hundreds of millions of ounces of silver at Keno Hill, where Hecla's mining. And so as you move south from there, it's the same sort of veins, except for the silver grades were dropping off. So when the historical operators drilled these, they would see, anywhere from 50 to a couple hundred grams silver, which is still decent silver, but it's lower than the bonanza grade silver you saw at Keno. And then they would note in their logs visible gold. But they didn't assay for gold because gold was $30 an ounce, and now we're north of $100 a gram for gold in Canada, right? So it's basically that was why the veins weren't interesting to the historical operators, basically just metal prices. And so what we've done in the last number of years was we kept working further south on our property, and as we go further south, we find that some of these structures are much more defined. We've got a couple big structures that you can actually pick out on Google Earth that you can trace on surface, and we have with surface samples of over 1 kilometer of strike, 500 meters of vertical. So I mean, if you just use those dimensions and combined with some of the drill hits that we already have in them, when Strategic drilled the Southwest, for example, they had intersects from 9 to 12 meters wide through these veins that were 6 grams gold. So big structures, big demonstrated strike lengths. So yeah, I mean, you can, when you start to look at those dimensions, you can easily hand wave, million ounce type targets. At Keno, a lot of their ore shoots will happen, between cross faults and whatnot. So I'm not pretending that the entire plane of the vein is going to be an ore shoot, but where you find those ore shoots, they can be incredibly rich. And where we've done a lot of chip sampling, we've got lots of assays that are north of 100 grams gold. So I mean, you don't need a very big slug of rock to have significant ounces when you're dealing with those kind of grades. And so I mean, our initial idea is to drill test along some of the strike up from some of the existing drill hits on there. So it's fairly low risk. We know that the vein is there. We've got some existing hits, but it's try to put some dimensions on that. So in the initial program would on the neighborhood of a few $1 million to get enough holes along strike from our existing hits to demonstrate, hey, there's a significant potential to put resource together. And then you'd have to step in with infill, which would, once you prove it out with the wider steps. So yeah, I mean, I think, based on what we have so far, it's, you can demonstrate some serious ounces on a couple of our more predominant structures with a few $1 million. And, there's been no shortage of discoveries, let me say that, in recent years with us getting into the southern basin. I mean, one of the reasons that nobody explored the southern part of our project historically is because it didn't have road access. And a road got built into there in 2017 when a major placer discovery was made, mining the surface gravels on the southern portion of our claim block. And that's really what got explorers into the southern part of our project for really the first time, even though we're right beside a mine that's been operating for 100 years.
So there's a valley that sort of cuts through the middle of the Mount Hinton project. And last year, as part of your program, you did a geophysical survey, and lo and behold, an anomaly emerged, which has you thinking this is a potential intrusion, possibly even the kind that creates reduced intrusion-related gold system type systems. It's you call it the GC anomaly. What led you to that? What makes you think that it is something potentially interesting? And when would you hope to be able to test it with a drill to see if this is something really important for this whole Mount Hinton area to the east of the Keno Hill district?
Okay, so there were a few data points got us going in there. Is, you know, first the metal zonation that I was describing, where you go from, you know, the lead zinc veins out at Keno, and as you moved south, you saw that change in mineralogy where you got hotter minerals, you got more gold, less lead and zinc. You went from like a siderite to a quartz gang in the system. So this fits the intrusion-related model that Craig Hart, and actually one of the co-authors on some of those papers is Moira Smith, who she's on our technical advisory board, and she has a lot of experience with the Pogo deposit, which is in Alaska, which they actually have these. It's an intrusion-related system, but it's not in the intrusion. It's these big quartz veins that are low sulfide, high gold quartz veins, and that's basically exactly what we see in the southern part of our basin. And so the theory there is that those are just outside of a source intrusion. So we had that geochem model that was vectoring us to the southern part of our project. We touched briefly on the geophysics earlier, so that's what we did this past summer. Is we flew a ZTEM survey, so it gave us magnetic data. We came up with a nice magnetic low in the preliminary data that was right in the valley bottom. So sent our prospectors out there and said, you know, see what you can find down there. But you know, that valley is covered in glacial till, which was, you know, why it took so long for the placer miners to make a discovery in there. Like, I mean, they only really got going in 2017, like I said, so it's quite a new discovery for placer in there. So no one had really done detailed exploration in that valley. You know, it's you're down in the bush. You've got a bit of till, but once we had both the geochemical vectoring and then a geophysical signature that proved up that thesis, and then we sent our prospectors out there, they actually found granitic rocks there. And that was the first granitic rocks we'd found, because, like I said, we were in the same quartzite package that comes off Keno. And so some of the initial thinking last year was, okay, well, you know, if you had an intrusion, but it was below 300 meters of quartzite, who cares? But if now you've got an intrusion that's coming to surface right in a valley, and that's the source of everything, you know, all of a sudden you could have something like a valley where, you know, their deposit comes right to surface.
Yes, and if you have grades like the valley deposit of Snowline, underground block caving becomes a distinct way of large-scale mining such system, which is what's interesting about the valley deposit. The gold grade is high enough to support underground mining if that's the direction where the resources is going to be. Now, in terms of location, many parts of Yukon are remote, difficult to access, as you mentioned earlier. But where you are, right just to the east of the Keno Hill district, in terms of access, infrastructure, and First Nations relationships, what's the situation like there if you make a significant discovery at Mount Hinton?
Well, I think it's probably one of the best places in the Yukon that you could make a discovery. I mean, we already have roads all over the project. You know, it's been explored historically on the north, and now we've got a big placer operation on the south part, so that gave us new road access in from the south. We connected the road system from the north and south now. So, yeah, I mean, we can keep our costs down without using helicopters, just dragging equipment in. And you know, you're not going into a greenfields area, right? You're in an area that has a long mining history. Like every drainage off our property has been staked for placer and has active placer operations on it. So there's small scale surface mines everywhere, and so, you know, you're not going into a brand new area. It's almost a brownfield site. I mean, it's a direct extension of the legendary Keno Hill district as well, right? So I think, you know, in Yukon, if you were to find a deposit, the easiest is obviously if you don't have to permit new access, right? I mean, so to come back to your First Nation standpoint question, you know, land use planning is ongoing in Yukon, and that's one of the things that's stressed. You know, they're trying to figure out, okay, what areas do we want to have open for mineral exploration? What areas do we want to keep protected for habitat and whatnot? So the fact that we're already in an active mining area, you know, I think that really sets it apart. And, you know, we've had, you know, good discussions with the local First Nation. I mean, they are supportive of mining. I mean, when we might get to it, there was obviously some setbacks in their territory last year, but, you know, they do still seem quite supportive, and want to be involved in the projects in their territory. So, yeah.
Now, when can you resume work on Mount Hinton? What's the budget you would like as a minimum for at least starting off this season? And suppose that includes drilling Mount Hinton. Do you have drill permits in place for that? And if you do have a discovery and need to expand the drilling footprint, how long would it take to get those permits to be able to start drilling off a new discovery?
Yeah, so we've already have a permit in place till the end of 2028, so we don't have to worry about that. We've been in contact with a number of the miners that are on site. They said they're going to try to get going, late April if they can. It's kind of snow dependent. I mean, we don't want to go out and make a mess of the trails. So, if you're out there when everything's melting off, you can sometimes make a bit of a mess. So we'll be in touch with them. So whether we can get going on our lower targets in May or June, minimum budget, I would hope to do at least $2 million of exploration this summer. That way, your mobilization costs aren't such a big part of your drill program. We've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 to 1,500 meters modeled out to test our valley target, that GC target on Granite Creek. Basically to test the resistivity feature that comes right to surface, right where we made the discovery of the granitic rocks. So we'll get an idea of what that intrusion looks like in fresh rock. And like I said, that could start, with financing as early as May possibly. And then, I don't want to forget about the vein system, obviously, because we do have some incredible hits on that already. I mean, I think that some of the historical thoughts on him were, these narrow vein structures, but I think that was due to a lot of the discoveries that were made on the northern part of the project. And as we come south and we start to see these much stronger structures that are, like I said, we've got drill hits that are in this 7 to 12 meter range on multiple of these structures. So I mean, that's a good width of a vein. And so, yeah, multi-phase program. Like I said, maybe the initial 1,000 meters at the intrusion target, and then step up to the veins once all the snow melts later in the summer to drill off the extension of those and prove some size potential on those.
So even if this GC anomaly doesn't deliver a 1 gram per ton plus intrusion-related gold system, but is a heat engine that came in there, what you're seeing off to the northwest, moving towards that heat engine, that's pretty much a virgin exploration target for you. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of repeating structures that, you can see them on Google Earth now with like the new imagery that they have. It's pretty incredible. And yeah, one of them was tested, like I said, in the 80s, and that was the one, 7 meters of, close to 100 grams silver, but no gold assays, just notes for visible gold in the assays. And then basically a repeat of that was just about 600 meters to the south, where Strategic drill tested in 2020, and then lo and behold, right away, the project was out the door to an option partner, and no work no more drill holes have been put into those since. So, it's been a few years where the project kind of went through different hands, and yeah, now here we are with gold running and fully permitted and ready to go. So last year, when Victoria Gold's heap leach pile at Eagle collapsed and bankrupted Victoria Gold, many of us just threw up our hands. Yukon's done. I'm not going to let anything ever happen be mined there again. But now that we've got some time since that accident, what has been the sort of longer-term fallout of this? And do we still need to be worried about Yukon becoming just this park that is off limits?
No, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, it was devastating for everyone, that the incident at Victoria, and definitely put a bit of a damper on everyone's summer last year. But it's also shown the Yukon government how important the exploration and mining sector is to their tax base. And so not only the Yukon government, but the First Nations, they want to see that Eagle mine back in production. Oh. And so that's the message that they're giving industry. They're supportive of it. They want to see it back in production. I know there's other larger companies in having a look at it. So there could be news on that. another acquirer to get that back in production. So I think, Yukon, basically every road in Yukon other than the Alaska Highway was built for mining. So it's got a long mining history, and I don't think it's going anywhere. And I mean, obviously, we all have to learn from what happened at Victoria Gold, because nobody ever wants to see that happen. But both the First Nation and the Yukon government are both still supportive of mining.
Okay, excellent. I've been speaking with Richard Drechsler of Trifecta Gold Corp at the Metals Investor Forum in Toronto. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much, John.